Coogs House. The Houston Cougars are making moves in the transfer portal, and this one is big.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're enjoying the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below, wherever you found this podcast, whether you're a Nike person or an Adidas person. Very distinctly one of those in this household. Now, today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. A lot more on that for the competitive folks like myself in a minute. But folks, we've got a lot of big news to talk about. Some of it is sad. We got to talk about Isaiah Hamilton and where Cougs are landing as they leave the Houston Cougar football program. We got to talk about some potential guys coming in the transfer portal, though, and some of these are really, really important signees. But the biggest one is the one that committed on Thursday. Kennesaw commit Carlos Allen. I guess I should say it's not formalized yet, but all reports indicate he is going to sign with the Houston Cougars this weekend. The transfer portal did just formally close for this window. The last day to put your paperwork in was on Tuesday, and then you could obviously get that process for the course of the last 2 days. So we, by the end of the day, Thursday, had the final people being told they were approved in the transfer portal. Right. Shortly thereafter, we got all these leaks about Carlos Allen being between Kansas State and Houston, and then ultimately choosing Houston. The 6-foot, 290-pound defensive tackle comes from Atlanta, Georgia, Frederick Douglass High School, for those of you that are familiar with that area. And it's fascinating to watch him dominate the games at Kennesaw State. Now, he only has a couple games in his film at Kennesaw State that have impressive stats. The 6-foot, 290-pound defensive tackle played a lot of nose tackle at Kennesaw. And I have to say, I'll draw comparisons in a second, but he takes on so many double teams that you really kind of have to grind some tape and watch some video about what this guy's doing. And I'm really glad I did that, because the stats don't just jump off the page, right? Like in one game, he had 2.5 tackles. He had one game with 9, right? He has half a sack here, post 2 tackles there, right? And you're like, wait a second, who is this guy? Right. But the truth is, the way he controls the game is by demanding double teams at the nose tackle spot. If you can get one guy to take up 2 blocks, you're in a positive across the rest of your front 7. That's important. Okay. At 6 foot 290, he doesn't have the gigantic measurable size that I think people want out of future pros, right? He moves extremely well. That's one benefit to being a little bit smaller. You got less of yourself to move, obviously. But he moves extremely well, plays with great pad control and leverage. He doesn't have extremely long arms either, but he really gets into the chest of the center or guard if he's shaded or slanting, and eats up that block and usually absorbs one or two others as well. From a technicality standpoint, folks who listen to the show for a long time know I love line play. I love watching the intricacies of it, kick slides and kick steps and punches and single hand waves, all kind of things that are more technical about the trench work and that kind of stuff. It's just a fun position to get to pay attention to that closely. Carlos Allen does a great job with his hands, right? His arms are not very long. He has to be crazy efficient because he doesn't have a whole lot of room to make up for misplacements, but he's incredibly good at getting his hands on the inside chest plate of the shoulder pads of the offensive lineman. And from there, he quickly has control of the guy in front of him, right? It is the kind of hand speed that I think translates from Kennesaw State to the Big 12. If anything, I think it translates because it's so instantaneous. I mean, it's before the ball is halfway back to quarterback on a shotgun snap. He has hands inside. And I think that there will probably be an adjustment period at the start of his time in Houston, but it looks like he's got 2 years of eligibility left. And I'm telling you, by the time he finishes, this guy's going to be really, really good. Great hands, again, dominated the A-Sun Conference. He played just 4 games last season before ultimately taking a red shirt. That way he preserves the extra year of eligibility. I think he knew he was going to be transferred. I read some of this as he knew he might be transferring to a bigger program. No one has said that. I don't mean to imply a character thing there or anything like that either. I wonder if that's there that was on a while. He only played 4 games in Kennesaw last season. He is a grad transfer, not that it matters anymore, but even in the old system, he'd be eligible to play immediately. I mentioned the quick hands. The footwork is a work in progress. He's so much stronger than kids in the A-Sun that it didn't matter. There will be times where he's strong enough to overcome some stuff against the Big 12 competition, and his hips were good. So I think it's the kind of thing that'll come together early in the first season of the Big 12. I don't think it's like bad habits as much as it's just like it wasn't an issue, right? And I think that's the kind of thing he'll get under himself. No pun intended on the footwork there. His hips are great, though. When the double team came, you teach a guy to slide your hips through and give one of the 2 offensive players your backside. He does that and get incredibly quickly with great explosiveness. But by far, the most impressive thing about him on film is he just doesn't quit. I cannot stress enough that when you have a nose tackle, I don't care how big the guy is, if you have a nose tackle that plays through the echo of the whistle, whether it's a 7-second, 8-second, 9-second play, if he can play in those trenches with that physicality for the entire duration of the play, from snap to echo of whistle, he's gonna be good. Like that translates from division to division. That translates from college to pro, from pro to Hall of Fame. I mean, if you can do that consistently, and he does, you're going to be good. Now, not just because he entered the transfer portal in December and left for Colorado, but this guy reminds me a lot of Juan Chidozie Nwankwo, similar profile in terms of size, both a little bit smaller than what a pro scout would want in terms of measurables. And I worry that I'm like automatically plug and playing him like that in my mind because of that. We saw how successful Dot was against Big 12 competition while he was healthy last season. It's the same kind of thing going on here. I don't think the size is going to inhibit him from being successful if he continues to play with the high motor and continues to work on his feet and use that, burst, explosiveness, and then those hands, man, gets those hands on you. He's got you. By all accounts, the kid's also a great family kid here. His write-up at Kennesaw State's fantastic. Family kid, majored in sports medicine. Really, really good add to the program. Really, really big win for Fritz. I actually saw a couple different Fritzes, both Wes and Willie, tweeting about it. I don't know which one's bringing that in. As far as on the staff, the top FCS defensive lineman in the portal. And I know that the knock here, before we move on to things in the second segment, is going to be that people will be like, well, there's the top FCS in the portal, and kind of rant and rave about that. But frankly, we both know that there were guys in the group of 5 that could play in the Power 5, that there were guys like at some point guys that develop or things click or they just didn't get seen by the right person or something fell through. Like there are plenty of these guys that can play at this level, at other levels of college football. But this guy, Carlos Allen, on the same defensive line as Keith Cooper and AJ Holmes in this 3-4-ish scheme, I think you've got an incredibly talented front 3 there. You're replacing Akeem Ajeej-Elias as far as like 1-for-1 on your roster. I think functionally he feels a lot more like the Dot Nwankwo replacement. But I really like this pickup. I spent some time. I DM'd one or two guys that pay attention to recruiting on a daily basis, and I spent some time watching a couple games of this guy. I had to dig on some YouTube stuff to find it more than a highlight reel. The kid can play. He can really, really play. I'm excited about it. I think Houston's going to be a good spot because of it. And Houston's probably not done. Another big pickup that I'm interested in seeing that may happen over the weekend, I want to get to in the second segment, because first, we're trying to build a well-oiled machine here. And for your well-oiled machine, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for a winning championship, also the kind of thing that keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because the eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, so that was not the only portal news for Houston on Thursday. While it was the only commit, there were a handful of other defensive players that looked like had Houston in their, top 12 or, has heard from kind of lists. Notably, I should point out here, this is probably the moment to say it, Baby Gronk followed me on Twitter. I think he follows a lot of people. It's not that impressive. But how are you going to follow me and not have U of H in your top 30? Baby Gronk. Come on, man. All right. Digressions aside, I will say the kid I'm most excited about that had Houston in their top schools or in their schools they're hearing from, schools they're considering, was a kid named Jacoby Mathews out of Texas A&M. I wanted to ask Andrew Stefaniak out of Locked On Aggies what he thought about Jacoby back when he entered the transfer portal, and here's what Andrew had to say.
Texas A&M safety Jacoby Mathews has officially entered his name in the transfer portal. We found out a while back that he planned to put his name in the portal, but when it opened on the 16th, he made it official that he will no longer be a part of the Texas A&M football program. A player that last season at times was a bright spot in a not good secondary for the Aggies. The secondary was the number one issue for Texas A&M last year, aside from, in all honesty, offensive line play. And you lose a guy in Mathews who many had written in as a starter this year. Now, he did announce a while back that he planned to leave. So, of course, many had already written him off and we're starting to figure out, hey, who's going to be the next guy up in the safety room? Coach Uggo did a good job bringing in players via the portal. You feel good about this room going forward, but Mathews is a guy who's played in a lot of games, former top 50 recruit in the composite rankings, highly, highly touted guy at high school, talented football player that is going to make another coach very happy somewhere in the country. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. A kid from Louisiana, does he go back home? Does he find somewhere else to play? Going to be very interesting. But Jacoby Mathews is a good football player that is going to be missed at Texas A&M thanks to the upside he possessed.
Now, I feel like I want to harp on a couple things Andrew brings because I'm intrigued by them too. But Andrew brought up, does he stay close to home? Right. Again, Jacoby is from Louisiana, specifically, I guess, if you know the geography of Louisiana, Ponchatoula. I'm not a Louisiana native. I don't know a whole lot about it. But interestingly enough, in his top set of schools, or the schools he's heard from the most in his recruitment in the transfer portal, there are no Louisiana schools. None. And He went from the state of Louisiana to A&M. Obviously, Houston and A&M are not that far. Houston is by far and away the closest school to home for Jacoby Mathews as it currently stands. I mean, like the next closest school is probably Florida State, geographically speaking. He's a high-end recruit, as Andrew mentioned, a top 50 in the country when he came out of high school in the 2022 class, right? Played in 10 games his freshman year, 11 games his sophomore year, started in 9 of them. I mean, he is a true high-end Power 5 starting caliber safety. And if staying close to home is important to him, why not Houston? Who knows Louisiana can make that pitch better than Fritz and his staff, right? Now, I could also make the argument that Fritz is building a great defense, seems to be very focused on building in the trenches and on the defensive side of the football. And frankly, I think it's going to be a ground and pound offense eventually. If not, we got some receivers that need to get the ball a little bit next year, but we're going to eventually get to where it's just the running back show. Parker Jenkins is going to have a lot of carries over the next couple of seasons. But I understand that people saying, but Jacoby can get NIL money here and here and there. And there's never just one thing. I understand that there are programs out there with gigantic NIL packages and all those kinds of things. But truthfully, each kid's going to have different things on their hierarchy of needs. And frankly, it might not even be that like NIL money is all that crazy high on his hierarchy of needs either. Or if it is high, it might not be that he has to have a bajillion dollars, much as just be taken care of, right? Houston can take care of people for sure. It's just we're still building towards the bajillion dollars, right? But if being close to home is the kind of thing that Andrew's pointing out when he enters the transfer portal, and if we're at the point where he's listing top schools and looking at all the schools and whatever, and Houston's the only school within a couple hours drive of home, I think Houston's got a real chance here. Now, I understand that there'll be a lot of big-time programs after Jacoby Mathews. He frankly, there's a world where you could say he can't make the wrong. There's always the wrong decision, but there's a world where you could say he can't make the wrong decision, right? But I feel like in looking at the body of work here, he'd fit in great with Houston. He also would get to play with AJ Halsey, a tremendous safety. We know Mo Williams, the freshman, stud recruit himself, coming in next year. It'd be a great safety room with the three of them all in it together. But sitting here in his 12 schools, it's Houston, then it's like Pitt, Washington, Cal, Penn State, Oregon. Like none of these schools are close. And if this close to home thing is at all important, I think this big time impact safety had 67 tackles in his 2 years at Texas A&M. Again, started 9 games as a sophomore last year in the SEC. I really, really, really think there is a real strong chance Houston makes a really serious run at this guy. And he's a game changer. Like if he commits to Houston, the kind of defense that Willie Fritz is going to run, a lot of speed on the field, a lot of, frankly, aggression. This is the kind of guy that could help turn a program around. And for whatever reason, if staying close to home is important, it might be a simple geography game that's one of those cases where, not unlike Mo Williams, not unlike Parker Jenkins, Houston just wins by default because they are the one close to home. And I am mad about it, but it's kind of interesting to see how that plays out. Now, one guy that has been Houstonian through and through, but is leaving the program. Looks like he might be making a decision this weekend. He made some headway in that decision on Thursday, and I do want to talk about him and kind of what we're noticing with some guys leaving the program in a second. But first, I told you guys earlier we were going to talk about this, and you probably rolled your eyes because I talk about Monopoly Go a lot, all times throughout the week. Feels like I talk about it almost every day. But I really do enjoy this game. Like I don't know what else to say. I enjoy the game. You can team up with friends for time tournaments. So it doesn't have to take a lot of time, even frankly, just to get a couple rounds. And you're going to work together in those kind of games and build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more the awesome prizes are. And there's so much to get, like different unique stickers, different playing pieces, emojis to send each other when you're trash talking. It's a ton of fun to play with your buddies. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free at Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, so Isaiah Hamilton came into Houston, Channelview High School, then Texas Southern, and then went to University of Houston as a transfer last year under Dana Holgorsen. 4 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown against Oklahoma State. Really blossoming corner in the Big 12 last year. And frankly, was set to be one of the best returning corners in all of college football this upcoming season. And I'm not just saying that because I like the kid. He really, like on different boards that his name was thrown on once he had the transfer portal and stuff like that, he had some national attention because of how quickly he adapted to Big 12 play. The assumption is that, okay, then that grow that exponentially as things keep getting more challenging. If he can really adapt like he did, where is the sky? Where's the limit for this kid? At 6 foot-ish, 6'1", 6 foot-ish, about $175. He's not like sized out of the position at all. Really, really impressive athlete in corner. And what's funny is I had I'll say an anonymous DM talking about conversations when he first came to Houston. There was talk like, is this guy like a high-end SEC one and done to the pros kind of guy? And obviously he chose Houston. That's not what ended up happening. And I don't know, they actually had a whole lot of those serious offers out there for it. But now, after a year at Houston, it seems like he is SEC bound. Now, we mentioned before when he entered the portal that Isaiah debated entering the portal back in December when the coaching change happened, right? He went through spring ball, went through the spring game, and ultimately decided afterwards that, you know what, this rebuild, I don't have a whole lot of time left in college football or whatever the reasoning. I gotta go do something different for my last year of college football, right? And he entered the portal, and it sounds like he's got SEC schools hot on his heels, like Alabama, like Auburn. It looks like he's getting crystal balled to Ole Miss. He's taking visits out in the South this weekend. I bet we'll get a decision out of him in the coming days. The kid's really good, and I don't know how you personally feel about it. If you're new to the show, my stance has been on all these kids, whether they're going to Colorado or to Ole Miss or to Texas Southern across the street. Wherever you go, right? You've been a Houston Cougar for some period of time. I wish you well, right? I'm not the hard feelings kind of guy. Do I wish it was happening at Houston? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But you get a very limited, specifically limited time to play college football. You should have a lot of say in what you're doing there. And while I could make the argument that you should do it at Houston, especially if you're a kid from Channelview that went to Texas Southern that's now at Houston and seemed to really embody that H. Go do what you want to do where you want to do it. I'm not the kind of guy that gets too terribly mean and aggravated about that. I do think it's interesting, though, that recruits leaving Houston are kind of like in the transfer portal are kind of going one of two ways. You're seeing guys go to group of 5 and smaller programs, like significantly smaller programs, or you're seeing them go to these high-end big NIL dollar other like big programs, right? So you've got people going to back to the American to play at East Carolina or going to FCS or what have you, or you have kids going to Miami, Ole Miss. UCLA is not the tremendous football program necessarily, but it's got a bunch of NIL money, right? Like Missouri's got a ton of NIL money, right? Like Colorado's got a bunch of NIL. You have those two ends of the spectrum, right? And frankly, if you go through and count the kids, a lot more of them are actually going to the smaller programs, right? They were not playing necessarily at Houston and looking to get to somewhere where they have a better chance to get on the field, it looks like, right? We think about these highlight guys that are going to the bigger programs, but truthfully, the majority of the numbers are going to the smaller ones. And again, get in where you fit in, find somewhere to play. I'm not mad at you. But I do think that situation Houston, interestingly, kind of exactly where they are, they're in this middle spot right now where they're growing out of the former Group of Five program. They're competing at the Big 12 level. And in terms of recruiting, they're one of the best hotbeds in America, which means they got the big dogs coming in every weekend to look at the kids right here. Right. And that interesting, like where all those things come together being depicted, where you see these transfers looking is interesting. Again, I would try to make the case, because I think for most kids it would be the case, that Houston's the best spot for them, for the kinds of things they're trying to do, that a lot of them, it's the same reasons they came here in the first place, right? But in a big picture, it's interesting that those are kind of the decisions you're saying made. Best of luck to Isaiah and to Sam at the U and to Ruben UCLA and all the places. I don't mean, and like I think I saw Carson's at East Carolina. Obviously, best of luck to Carson. All those kinds of guys, right? Wherever end of the spectrum you're going there. But I do think it's just kind of, and this is when I pay attention to macro level things and get on my diatribe. Sometimes some of you guys like that, some of you guys don't. So that's fair. I just think it's interesting to see how that situates Houston in a very realistic spot right now. And that, like, we're looking at, like, okay, so how do we get up into that next echelon? What comes next? Obviously, this rebuild with Fritz is going to take a little bit of time, but as we start winning games, that move up happens without you having to touch it a whole lot. Now, we'll have the weekend here to see a lot of movement, I'm sure, in the portal with all the names officially in it. I feel like you're about to see a whirlwind of names flying around this weekend. That's good. That's fun. We'll be talking about each and every one that says they're coming to Houston very, very soon. So make sure you subscribe. Hit the bell so we know you're live. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you haven't checked out Awful Announcing, wrote a really cool write-up after talking to David Locke about Locked On Podcast Network. Go check that out. It was really nice to read. Again, Locked On Cougs, proud member, Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Go Cougs.